start straight at 2 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Today's class is in a webinar format, so your camera is not going to be active during the presentation. It means I can't see anybody. It's kind of like entertaining myself, and I'm comfortable with that. So as long as you can hear me, you are in the right place. You only have to attend to get your credit. Okay. The time here, it's all being tracked electronically. Trek takes care of all that kind of stuff. Mind you, we have nothing to do with posting your CEs. Trek does all of that. They typically do it in about a week. Okay. So if they don't call and complain to me. All right. They will take care of you. But if you ever have any questions about our services or booking an inspection, anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lucas Sanders. He is the Texas Regional Manager, and I have put his contact information in the chat for you. We service the whole Austin, Houston, San Antonio, all those areas, that whole service areas where we cover. I've also put in the chat a link to other classes, other CE classes that we have coming up. So feel free to check that out, and because we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Matter of fact, I have a list here in just a second. But all right. Like my friend would say, Matthew McConaughey, let's get this thing rolling. So just a heads up, we will be recording this, so it will be available. If you want it, just let me know. And the easiest thing to do is put a little note in the chat, and I'll get it out to you. It doesn't cost you anything, but that's the easiest thing for me. It's right there and clean. If you want to ever do these for your team or your office or anything like that, feel free to get a hold of us. We can set that up too. You get 2 credits for this, toward your renewal, your license renewal, which is really cool. It didn't cost you anything to get them. Like I said, Trek will usually get this up in about a week or so watch out for that. You might also get an email giving you the option to give us a little feedback. Okay. All feedback, all input is welcome. Okay. Even if you don't like my dad jokes, that's okay. I'm too old to be offended. So let us know. The whole goal here is to make sure everybody gets something out of this. Okay. So if there's any ways we can improve it, let us know. My name is John Bolton, and I am the instructor today, obviously. I started doing home inspections back in 1998. And besides a degree in building construction, I picked up a few trophies and licenses along the way. I've completed over 12,000 various inspections throughout my career, and I have helped train and develop inspectors across the country because I'm also a national speaker on all things inspection related. I've published a bunch of articles and even written a couple books. And I tell you this stuff not to brag by any means, but just to let you know where I'm coming from and maybe earn a little bit of trust, a little bit. So again, if you have any questions as we go through, since I can't see anybody, just speak up. This is for you, and you're not going to offend me. So just let me know you're there because I can't see anybody. There we go. We have a bunch of other classes. Here's the ones that are coming up. If you want to join, that link down there at the bottom, I put in the chat. You can just copy and paste, all right? If you enjoy this, find it beneficial, please tell your friends. We appreciate it. Also, if you are, I think I already mentioned, if you want us to do this for your team or your office, please give us a holler. So, see what we have here today. This class here is being sponsored by TLC Home Inspections. TLC is a local multi-inspector firm that, like I said, represents Austin, Houston, San Antonio, all those areas. And this is what you get when you choose TLC as your inspection partner. We do over 6,000 inspections a year, a lot of inspections. and we've got 1,500 or so five-star reviews online. We know that you guys work 7 days a week, so we are available 7 days a week as well. With our inspections, we include warranties, and all our full inspections that cover all kinds of things beyond the inspection. And we are also really excited to offer a home binder. Home binder is really, really cool. For the client, it's a single, simple, secure online platform where they can store all their home maintenance stuff. It's kind of like a digital filing cabinet, if you will. They can put their inspection reports in there, any renovation work that's been done, warranties, all that kind of stuff. And they get maintenance reminders on appliance recalls. Appliance recalls are awesome. You guys would be shocked at how many appliances are recalled every single year, whether it's the wire is too small or the latch breaks and whatever, it's always a free fix. And this way, you have all of the appliances covered, and the software checks it every year or every month for you and lets you know if something has been suddenly recalled and you get a free fix. So that's really cool. It also does, setting up the utilities, all that cool stuff associated with moving. The companies that are involved, they're all vetted for the market. And this isn't anything that anybody has to use, but it's just totally free, complimentary. So it's really cool. But you know what's awesome is for you guys, the agents, Homebinder brands every one of these messages that gets sent out to them with your information. So it keeps you at the top of their minds. Really, really cool. Homebinder also does a repair pricer in there for all the deficiencies found in the report. They're all researched to your specific area, so you know that they're accurate. And that only gets sent to you guys, the agent. That part, the whole repair pricer thing, doesn't get sent to the client. So just you get that. The reports are typically sent out that day, assuming all the technology gods are on our side. And we offer a 200% guarantee. What that means is if you're not completely satisfied, not only are we going to refund the money for you, but we're going to send out the inspector of your choice to redo the inspection. And that takes away a lot of the risk in at least giving us a shot if you've never used us before. So here's a few things that separate us from the competition. We do a free thermal imaging scan on every inspection that we perform. This gives us the ability to identify stuff that you cannot see with the human eye. Okay, you can see missing insulation and leaks that might be behind the toilet or in a plumbing wall, things that you can't see, breakers that are overheating, ductwork that's leaking out, all those kind of things. It's really, really awesome. Most of our packages also include foundation elevation readings. We take that guesswork out of how the foundation on that house is actually performing. All right. Your client gets that data and it's kind of foundational, if you will, pun intended. So if there's ever a question that has the foundation moved, well, you'll know because you've got that number to look back to. We also do the irrigation systems in our inspections, up to 12 zones included. We do the in-house termite, pool, sewer scope, and Lord, I highly, highly, highly recommend sewer scopes for every single house, even yours. You would be shocked at how much stuff we find. Just because it's good on year one doesn't mean it's going to be good on year 10 or 15 or any, things break and roots happen. So highly, highly recommend those. And depending on what market you're in, we do indoor air quality, mold assessments, sampling, that kind of thing. So don't forget about us. Lastly, last thing I want to say, so we get to the fun stuff, we give you the option to close or pay at close. No extra fees. 2 thumbs up? Yeah, I think so too. that's it's when you don't have to come out of pocket that five, six, seven, $800, whatever it is. Now you can go ahead and get that sewer scope that you may have withheld, before. So that is us. Now let's get to the good stuff. Here are our objectives for today. We're going to cover what is stucco, number one, because that's what you do in a stucco class, right? We're going to go over the different types of stucco that are out there, some of the pros and cons of stucco. We're going to talk about stucco is actually it's multi-layer veneer on a house. So we're going to go through each one of those steps. We're going to cover that whole process, and we'll even talk about some stucco inspections, things like that. Uh, Things to look out for, things to monitor, those red flags that you need to be looking out for, uh, as well as maintenance is huge with stucco. Okay, if you don't maintain it, bad things happen. We'll take a look at some of that. So let's get right into it. So let's start out with what is stucco? That's when you sit on gummo, right? There ain't no better way to start out a stucco class than with a good dad joke. All right. Stucco is a, a type of hand troweled masonry plaster. It's made of cement, water, and lime, and sand, of course. And that comes in a lot of different textures, a lot of different finishes. If it's installed properly, stucco performs pretty dang good. It's very, very durable. It's going to be one of those 50 plus year products. And that's probably why we see it, uh, especially down in the South. Okay. There are two primary or two common stucco types that you're going to see out there. One of them being your traditional hard coat, the other being a synthetic. And I will show you pictures of both. The first is going to be your traditional hard coat stucco that everybody is familiar with. It's that cement, lime, sand, and water. Okay, this creates literally it's like thin concrete. Okay, very hard finish, and again you can do all kinds of really cool textures and stuff. And it's neat to see how as decades come and go, styles kind of come and go. It's neat. Well, look, I've got a picture actually coming up with about 6 different types. Um, so anyway, this it's applied in a anywhere from a 1 to a 3 coat application. Okay, depending on what kind of system, depending on well, geography has a lot to do with it too because you're the weather. But you will have one of the primary components in it are your flashings, and those will be traditional galvanized metal or plastic. Uh, it's been plastic for the last decade and a half, probably, give or take, as that becomes more prevalent, at least where I am at. I am in Central Florida right now. It could be a little bit different in your area. There's always exceptions, but so typically it's applied over some type of exterior wall sheathing. Okay. If, like plywood or OSB, something like that. This right here, this picture right here, this graphic is nice because it shows you exactly those layers. And we're going to discuss each one of these in better detail as we go through this. Um, all right. So you can see here, you got your wall framing, right? Turn on my laser. So we've got wall framing back here, wall sheathing, again, which is going to be your OSB or your plywood. You will have a water resistant barrier. Okay. In the old days, it used to be felt paper. Now, virtually all you've seen in the last couple decades is um, synthetic products. Then you have metal lath that's going to hold all the stucco on the wall. Make sense? You have a basically a scratch coat, or if you want to call it base coat, that's fine. A brown coat and a finish coat. So that's a three on a three-layer, three-lift system. Those are your three layers. Then of course at the bottom here, you'll see your weep screed. Okay. We'll discuss all of these things as we go through this, but just a real quick visual. I know at least for me, when I have a visual in my head, it's easier to process, comprehend, and process the stuff that uh, say I'm learning in a class, like you're listening to me rant on and insert dad jokes. At least you'll have this image in your head. And here are six cool uh, textures that you can find. And there's a whole lot more. And I know you've seen different ones, but again, I like looking at this going, man, that's cool. Like maybe my next house, if I have any say, we'll do something like one of these or something else that I've seen. So even though, it's like this freestyle, you see virtually everywhere. It's fast and easy, and that's why it's so common. Some of these others will just there's more labor involved. So, but if you're building like a custom, you can dictate whatever kind of finish you want, right? But it just makes you think, right? Makes the squirrels start running around in there. The next type that you might see is the synthetic type. Okay, they call it an EIFS system, EIFS, exterior insulated finishing system. Okay, this again is a multi-layered exterior finish, and there's an acrylic resin in it to help it be a little more water resistant. Um, it's not nearly as common as hard coat. Down here in Central Florida, the only time we ever see this in modern construction is commercial buildings. There was a time when it was pretty popular, and I can picture neighborhoods near us, but that was also back in the day in what was the 80s or 90s, early 90s, I guess, where there were so many of these systems that were really, really bad and failed real bad, like all over the news. And if you go to Google and look up images, I have a couple I'll show you, but you can find all kinds of images, and it was an absolute nightmare, especially if you were the one that closed on that home and you've got substantial damage because it's not easy to remediate. But they've been using the EVE system for a very, very long time. Like this dates back to World War II. It comes in real handy when you have a lot of damages, like from a war, okay? And you live in an environment like that. Uh, it gave the good hard finish that so many of European buildings have, but it also had the thermal resistance that they really need over there. So that's where I believe, from what I've read, it exploded there and has made its way over to our country. But again, we see it primarily on commercial buildings, and this is I think they brought it over here in the 80s, and then it got real. Yeah, it was the late 80s, early 90s, something like that, when it was real popular, and it got really, really bad. Um, like I said, just the massive failures. What would happen is, and it was again, the way I understand it, it was all application, installation error. Okay, when it wasn't done properly following manufacturer's installation instructions. But what happened was water would get in, and since you have that layer of insulation, okay, it drastically reduces the drying capacity of that wall assembly. So water would get in because it wasn't done right, and it couldn't evaporate. It couldn't dry out. So everything on the inside that's wood frame would rot, and it was really, really bad. And let me just show you the pictures right here. There's a hole cut to do a destructive investigation, and you see the picture on the right. Very, very common. It was in the news a lot. It got to a point where, and if you have this in your area, you can actually do a search, let your fingers do the walking. You can do a search for somebody that is specifically trained in EIFS. It's the Exterior Design Institute, EDI, Exterior Design Institute, and they will have what do you call that? A list of contractors or inspectors in the area that can uh, come help identify, do destructive investigations, do moisture mapping, damage assessments, those kind of things. So if you do come across this stuff, it would be a good idea to hire somebody with a little bit more knowledge, a little more education in this product. All right, some of the pros and cons. Here's some of the pros and cons. Stucco is very appealing. Okay, a lot of reasons. One would be fire resistance. You can't burn concrete, right? A 1 inch coating of stucco gives you about a 1 hour firewall rating. In other words, it prevents the spread of fire from one unit to another or one wall to another for at least an hour. So when you have multifamily, townhomes, neighborhoods like that where everything's built really close together, maybe those zero lot line places, that would be a really nice pro. Then, of course, it's aesthetics. It's really cool. You can add all the different textures, but you can even add um, color to it. You can add dyes into the mix and give you some nice earth tones or something like that. Um, you can you can even carve your name in it when it's wet, if you like. Uh, it does come with some downsides though, and we've got to talk about all this stuff. Because it's concrete, it by nature it's going to be air quotes brittle. All right. If the foundation moves, not brittle like you hit it with a lawnmower and it breaks like you know what's that stuff? It was like honey with almonds in it, crackle or whatever that stuff was called. It usually not like that, but if the foundation or something like that moves, you have some settlement. Well, then it's not going to flex like other exterior veneer options are out there. So I guess simply put, it's just it may not be the best choice in areas where you have really high clay content. Okay, high clay content in your soil, you have that expansion and contraction, right? As it rains, as it dries, it moves. So those may not be the best areas. I have been told that you guys have some of those, and I wrote it down here so I would never forget. But the east side of Austin, if you didn't know, uh, if I'm wrong, blame Lucas. That's where I got it from. So he said that you've got the real high clay content over east side of Austin area there. So what happens with clay is that expansion and that contraction, the rain, the drought. right? It moves, and then you'll get cracks in the stucco. Over time, though, even stucco that's on houses with really good foundations, you're going to develop hairline cracks. Always remember, the better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house is going to perform. Period. All right. Let me tell you something. All cracks leak. And when water gets in, bad things happen. I will tell you about a study, and that's why I say all cracks leak. But I'm starting to get excited. So hold on. I know I have a slide about it coming up. Um, it Another con might be it doesn't for hard coat stucco, it doesn't have that R value that a synthetic stucco with some polystyrene insulation in it. You're going to have a pretty low R value in a thin layer of basically concrete, right? So colder climates, probably not going to see a whole lot of it. But to better understand how stucco works, let's do a deeper dive into these layers, okay, as it's being constructed. Constructing a wood frame stucco wall is just layers of stuff, okay? Once we get through these layers, I do have a little video in here that I'll show you. Really short video, not really short, but it's a video, and it'll give you some of that experience, the cognitive part of this.
Can you send that video too?
Um, it should work.
I mean, can you send it to us? A copy or a transcript of what we're going through?
It should play. If it doesn't, what I would have to do is either find it on my machine or look it up on Google. But yeah, we'll get it to you one way or the other. Good to see you, Isaac.
Likewise.
All right, so it all starts with the substrate. Okay, the substrate or the wall sheathing, if you will. This is a typical wood frame Texas house. Besides the structural value, the sheathing provides that surface where all these layers are going to be attached. Okay, that substrate could be wood, it could be cement or chipboard or fiberglass type board. When you're building something with OSB or plywood, that type of wood can be very absorbent. Okay, which is why you have multiple layers in order to try to keep it dry. And I'm getting excited. I want to tell you something about the layers here. The next layer is the water resistant barrier. Okay. Now, water resistant barriers, or WRBs, uh, for those of you that were in the military, right? Everything's an acronym. WRB, water resistant barrier. Those, it's just part of the whole system, the whole wall assembly, right? This stuff, it helps uh, prevent air and water from getting in, but it still allows for water vapor to get out. Okay, so it will go, it's kind of a one-way valve, if you will. So uh, it attempts to keep that substrate, that wood, as dry as possible, because when it gets wet, bad things happen, right? You get mold, termites, wood rot. If it's bad enough, been going on long enough, you get structural issues. But because of all the water-related problems and the lawsuits that follow, to minimize problems, the builders have started integrating much better moisture management systems because we know the water's coming, so you manage it. You try to take care of it, just like the ground around your house. The water is coming, and you manage that water with swales and grade that goes away from the house, and things like that to direct. The water is going to get the house wet. Okay, so there's ways of managing that water. There's a lot of products and processes on the market, including the synthetic underlayments. Those are going to perform a lot better than felt. Over time, felt just it becomes brittle and breaks, and it doesn't work anymore. Um, there are rain screen systems, so incidental water that gets beyond, gets inside, gets drained out. There's a lot of different sealants and even some self-adhered flashing membranes, especially around windows and stuff like that. Cool thing is that they just keep getting better. Okay, there's always advances in the technology, um, people inventing new ways to do things, building codes, adapting. But all of these moisture management products have their place, of course, right? Depending on the environment, your geographical environment, the actual construction, those project details itself. So if you're building a house and thinking about stucco, it's always best to consult a design professional, i.e., an architect or somebody like that. Talk to them about how they manage water because, again, everybody knows it's coming, right? It rains. So talking to a professional in your area is always the best thing to do. Moisture management is always the best or the most important thing because when water gets in, bad things happen, right? So if we do a pre-drywall inspection on a stucco home, obviously, this is one of the main things we look at is this moisture barrier. All right, next layer is the metal lath. Okay, the best analogy I've ever heard is to think of the metal lath as rebar for the stucco. Is that a good one? That's a good one, isn't it? Rebar for the stucco. There's a lot of there's a range anyway of different systems that are used in the lathing process for the stucco installation. So I wanted to go over some of these different types and uh, how they're used, what they look like. I've got some good pictures here um, because there are certain types of wire that are better and they do different things. And knowing which type of lab to go with is going to be real critical in that installation process. So let's take a look at some of these. All right, first one's going to be a 17 gauge. And let me say real quick, I want to talk about 17 gauge and 20 gauge. The lower the gauge, the heavier the wire. Same thing with electrical. Okay, the wire physically is going to be larger, but it'll have a smaller number. So the smaller the number, the bigger the gauge. So with stucco lath, we're dealing with 17 and 20 gauge wiring. The 17 being a little heavier, like I said, is typically done on 3-coat systems. Okay. The wire itself, it sticks off the wall just a little bit. And it's called furring, 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 like a furring strip. On the inside of a house, you have furring strips, and then you on a block wall. Picture that most of you have seen new construction going up, block wall, furring strips, and then the drywall on top of that. So the wire itself it'll have these. I'll show you close up. I got coming here, but it creates that little gap, okay, called furring, and that way stucco can get keyed up in behind it, okay, pushed up behind it. Um, Furring and keying are common terms. If Alex Trebek ever asks you about those, you'll know, okay. Keying is shoving that stucco up into that lath because you want to get the lath somewhere in the middle. Okay, that's going to be the best, right smack in the middle. It's going to perform better. If you think of it like rebar, uh, it helps provide that rigidity. If you guys have ever been to the coast, lived on the coast, owned something on the coast, it's more than clearly evident when you get cracks, water gets in, and the steel that's in there will corrode and expand. As it expands, it will pop. So even if it's something like a concrete balcony and it's 6 inches thick, it'll still break concrete apart because it's um, or concrete's very weak in tensile strength. So when that wire gets wet and corroded, it expands. And when you're talking something that's less than an inch thick, well, the cracks get bigger and the chunks fall off. Make sense? That's why I said the better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house performs. The two different pictures here, they're the same gauge. But the picture on the left is using wire that uses little square patterns, and the one on the right is a more honeycomb pattern. They both work just fine, okay? But again, the 17 gauge is more for a 3-coat system. Of course, the wire, it's going to be galvanized, so it doesn't corrode, right? And it'll last. So what do you see here? Well, one, if you've ever seen metal lath, you know how thin it is, right? So either this stucco is very, very thin, or the lath is up close to the surface of that stucco. You can actually see the lath printing. You see the kind of diamond shape. You can see it right here real well. And then, of course, the corrosion. So water is getting into that and it's corroding. As it corrodes, it expands, develops cracks and or bigger cracks, and more water gets in. And it eventually gets real bad. Check this out. This is an example of chronic water absorption, and the lath is literally disintegrating. You can actually, this is in old school, this is felt paper, not a synthetic. But look how thin it is. It's only as thick as that wire. So it's way too thin to begin with. And water gets in there. Nobody's maintained this. All cracks leak. So water gets in, and here it's disintegrating. This was so bad, I could crush it in my fingertips. It's very easy, not hard at all. So it is critical to maintain your house. If this motivates somebody to go paint their house this weekend, I have done a great job. All right, next, this is a 20 gauge. This is typically more of a 1-coat stucco application, and this is a really good image. You see how the wires, deformed is not the right word I'm looking for, but you see how it's kind of bent down, holds the wiring off of the surface of the underlayment. That way you can key in that stucco underneath it. The 17 gauge is going to be thicker and tougher, right? But the 20 gauge will be thinner, flimsier. Um, it's not nearly as strong. So that's why you see it just on, or if you see this, you know it's going to be a 1-coat stucco application. So the 1-coat wiring typically has a little smaller spacing, inch or so, compared to something that might be an inch and a half on the 3-coat wiring. So we've got a couple pictures here. You can see how thin it is. I just like that picture on the right. That's really cool. Really, now you can get that concept of furring. And it comes like that. You could call this wire preferred. Here I'm just entertaining myself. Since it's smaller, thinner, it is easier to work with. I get it. But anyway, now when you get something on the ceiling, okay, they typically use something called a high rib. You see the big teepees here? So it's got a real high rib. That kind of lath is meant for ceilings, stuff that's over your head. Okay. The design is made to hold the plaster in place and try to minimize the number of fallouts. Fallouts are the small chunks of mud that fall out in your face when you're, applying it overhead. It's going to be a lot more rigid because those grooves, those little teepees there that run down the wire, it's going to keep it real stiff. This we have, they call expanded metal lath. Okay, this particular lath, much smaller pattern. Okay, on the wire. This allows for some really good contact area. Okay, so this comes in real handy when you have a patch to be made or there's a transition where you can span that transition, uneven surfaces, stuff like that. Uh, I have been told again by Lucas that you guys don't have this type of stuff, but this is all that we ever see in Florida. This kind of expanded metal lath. Does that sound consistent with what you guys experience? You can always click a little thumbs up or something. I'm going to assume that Lucas is right then. Then you have something that's pretty cool. This is fiberglass. They call it mesh, the fiberglass mesh. This is yet another alternative to metal, and it helps fur it out a little bit. It is code compliant and all that stuff. Um, I know installers love it because it's really simple and easy to cut and doesn't cut back, like metal does. It's really lightweight, so it's for the installers a lot more user friendly, if you will. Um, I heard that it is a little more difficult to get and it costs more, so you don't typically see it as much. But again, now you know. Well, this one they're actually using a stone veneer. They call this AMSV, Adhered Masonry Stone Veneer. This is also supposed to be done in layers. So this does not look like this is a proper application. I won't say that it absolutely is wrong, although I believe it is. You would have to read the manufacturer's installation instructions to be able to prove it. But you got gaps like this. Where does the water go? Well, it goes right into here into this single thin layer of your stucco layer, right? Once you get past that, well, now we're into uh, past the mesh easily. And if there's any holes or damages to the underlayment, you've got water right into the wall assembly itself. Now, one question I get a lot is about these foam accents. It's just another layer, if you will, right? But that's just foam with some of this mesh on it. That's it. It's really cool because it's very lightweight. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So it's not like wood that rots and you're limited to what you can do with wood, especially as far as design and stuff like that. Because you get something, like these little mini You call them buttresses or something, these kind of things. That would be much more expensive in wood, and then they're going to rot. So you can do some really cool stuff with, foam accents. You can you can even take, if you guys are into fixing and flipping, you can really change the overall outside architectural look of the entire house without doing any kind of real structural modifications, right? It can completely change uh, an average looking house and make it something extra average. What do you call extraordinary, right? Creating trims and accents and stuff like that where before there was nothing. You get into an older house where it was just all vanilla, plain Jane, and you can really add some really cool visual stuff. Uh, so if again with an older house you're trying to flip and sell, this is going to make curb appeal a whole lot better. So maybe you get more than what you're asking for, or at least what you're asking for. I see that things are starting to change towards the seller's market, and at this point, uh, maybe you're trying to just maintain where values are, or what you can get for selling your home today, as it continues to change. Now, because it is foam, it's not going to be as sturdy as something like wood. All right. So it may be more prone to dents and damages. Falling, this was a falling tree branch. It crushed it. It wouldn't necessarily crush a piece of wood, but this is also 20 years old and has only been painted twice, as opposed to wood that you would have to paint a whole lot more than that, right? If you have features that are down low, they can be subject to lawnmower damage, weed eater damage, things like that. You can tell that these are foam. Like when you touch these, it's going to feel hard because that's a stucco-like product that you're touching. Okay, but it's not very thick at all. Well, you can see in this picture how thin it is, and then below that is foam. So there'll be a little bit of give to it. You'll almost always see some kind of mesh under this, and that helps give it some strength, some rigidity, perform a little bit better. But you're still going to get some damage. It helps though. But well, the other but, this is really easy to repair. That they even sell little repair kits in the Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, whatever's near you, and you can do a lot of this yourself. It's not tough. Okay, so the stucco application process. Here is your scratch coat. Okay, it's the first layer. And he's keying it into the lathe, right? This is the first one in this. We'll look at a three coat application here. That's applied with what do they call that? A hawk and trowel. That's what he's using. The hawk in his left hand, the trowel in his right. He scrapes it and keys it up into the lathe there. So you get that spread, evenly all over that. And it'll be a little bit less than half an inch thick on your first layer there. The total thickness on wood frame is going to be 7/8 of an inch. So 3/8 or a little bit less than a half, just kind of give you a visual how thick it is. It's not real thick. Then the next layer is going to be the scratch coat. Okay. After the cement is on that wall, they use what they call a scarifier that looks like a really bad to the bone back scratcher, right? That's a scarifier. And it makes those horizontal lines in the stucco so that the next coat has something to grab. Okay, that first coat had the lath to grab and adhere and stay up. With the scarifier, it's creating those little ridges, so it's got something to hold on to. Then, after you've allowed some curing, there should be curing in between these these layers, and it's usually a few days or 3 to 5 days, okay, depending on the product. Um, Now you're ready for the final coat, or what they call the brown coat. Okay, this coat is applied. It's very similar techniques with the scratch coat we saw, but instead of a using the hawk and trowel or a scarifier, cool words, right? Hawk and trowel and scarifier. You have something called a derby, and it's kind of hard to see here, but it's this real long. It's like a really long trowel, two-fisted trowel. That's a derby. It's about 3 feet long. Got a couple handles on there. That you'll take that and it pushes the cement up around and it helps you make sure everything is even. Okay, make sure it's as uniform as possible when they apply that. That's going to also be about 3/8 of an inch thick. So just like that, the scratch coat. The brown coat usually takes a little bit more time to cure. We're getting much thicker now, right? You're talking 2 to 4 weeks is what it should be allowed to cure in that time frame. Unfortunately, well, at least in Central Florida, okay. I'm not calling anybody out in Texas, but in Central Florida, it just never ever gets done exactly the way it should be. Leave it at that. But you can see in the picture here, these guys are applying that brown coat, and this is a good example of adding accents, to add more aesthetics instead of something that was just a completely flat, ugly wall. This gives you some kind of texture, right? Next, we will have the finish coat, and this is the final step. All right, the finish coat, top coat, final coat, same difference. This is going to be applied with that hawk and trowel, just like the first coat that went down. And this is where you can really customize and make it, different techniques, different finishes. So it's here, if you're the one building it, you can do this to, your personal preferences. Obviously, if you're buying existing or an executive home where they're building and you buy them, you have very little input. It just kind of is what it is. But um, again, there's two main types of materials used in stucco finishes: the synthetic and the hard coat. Remember, the hard coat is your traditional stucco, like we just sat here and looked at. That's typically what you're going to see. Um, they both have advantages, they both have disadvantages, and they have different kind of finishes too. But here's several examples of some of those textures. It's really up to you, when you're building it, you and your contractor, like whatever kind of look you're going for. Um, some textures maybe it works better to get, and they have there's different overall looks and feels. A flat, smooth texture, you see that and you think of Mediterranean, right? If you've got a sand kind of finish, it's a little more modern, a little more American. Really depends on what you want. But again, this gives you an idea, and you're not limited to these four. It's there's tons of different textures. All right, so here's how they all come together. Little recap here. Uh, this diagram, nice for that visual again, right? So you can see there are multiple layers, how they come together. So first you have your wall, right? Your framing. And ladies, what do we call these right here? Studs. That's right. That's right. Studs. We call those studs. Right. Next, we have our sheathing. And ladies, what do we call the sheathing? Just sheathing. Sheathing. That's it. This one looks like, well, it's either plywood or OSB, but that's typically what you're going to see. Then you have your water resistant barrier, right? WRB. If this almost looks like it's a bad picture of felt, but it could be older installations will be felt. Newer within the last decade and a half, 2 decades would be more a synthetic underlayment. Then you have the lath, right? And then your 3 layers. So you got your scratch coat, brown coat, and finish coat. So burn that in your mind. Now I want to go ahead and share this video. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. It worked yesterday when I tested it out to make sure, but you know how things go. We don't expect anybody here to get into stucco application, but it's just so impactful when you can see it. It's kind of like being there, but you get to sit in the AC and watch this. It's like 7 minutes, but it's a good visual aid. So keep my fingers crossed. We really haven't gotten out of sequence, but one slide. So
for centuries, stucco has proven to be one of the most enduring, versatile, and weather-resistant exterior wall finishes available. With its variety of colors and textures, stucco continues to be one of the most popular wall systems. Stucco can be applied over standard wood frame walls in a 3-coat process and over masonry and poured concrete walls in a 2-coat application. Before starting your project, check local building codes for wall assembly and moisture barrier requirements in your area. Weather-resistant stucco walls require the use of 2 layers of Grade D waterproof building paper over the wall sheathing, including plywood, OSB, exterior gypsum board, and concrete board before the application of the base coat stucco. When attaching the waterproof building paper, vertical seams should be overlapped by 6 inches or more, and horizontal seams should be overlapped by 4 inches in shingle fashion. The building paper should also extend 16 inches around all corners. Once the water-resistant building paper is in place, all trim accessories should be installed. Trim accessories can be cut to size using metal snips. Cut edges are often very sharp, so always wear gloves when working with these materials. A weep screed is a typical accessory required by code. Weep screeds are installed along the bottom edges to allow any water that has entered the wall to escape. Casing beads should be installed to neatly terminate stucco at the end of a wall. Casing beads also act as a guide to help maintain a consistent stucco thickness. Casing beads for a 3-coat system should be 3/4 of an inch thick. Casing beads for use in a 2-coat system over masonry or concrete should be 1/2 inch thick. Then, galvanized expanded metal lath or 1-inch woven wire stucco netting is installed over the entire surface, overlapping by 1 inch on the horizontal seams and 2 inches on the vertical seams. Galvanized nails or staples should be used every 6 inches, both vertically and horizontally. Make sure that the nails or staples penetrate the studs a minimum of 1 inch. The lath or stucco netting should also extend 16 inches around all corners. If the base coat stucco is applied to a clean, unpainted concrete or masonry surface, waterproof building paper and metal lath are not required. Then, control joints should be placed to create wall panels no larger than 144 square feet, keeping the panels as square as possible. Stucco will shrink as it hardens and cures. Control joints help reduce the potential for shrinkage cracking. Expansion joints are required anywhere there are existing wall expansion joints and at inside corners and changes in substrate. Expansion joints are designed to allow for the expansion and contraction of the stucco wall panels with changes in temperature. Corner trim should be used on all outside edges to protect the exposed stucco and to provide clean, finished lines. Now that the substrate is properly prepared, it is ready for the base coat stucco application. Quikrete base coat stucco and Quikrete base coat stucco with water stop are recommended for use in a traditional 3-coat system over wood sheathing and as the base for a 2-coat application over masonry or concrete. These pre-blended stuccos are extremely workable for hand-applied stucco applications and have the high bond strength required for a successful project. Mix the base coat stucco to a workable consistency. The proper consistency is achieved when the stucco will hang on the trowel held at a 90-degree angle. Stucco that is mixed too wet will sag. Stucco that is mixed too dry will not adhere properly to the metal lab. One bag of 80-pound base coat stucco will cover about 27 square feet at 3/8 of an inch thick. Using the square trowel held at a 45-degree angle, apply the base coat stucco using firm trowel pressure to force the stucco into the lab. Work from the bottom of the wall up and apply at a thickness of about 3/8 of an inch over the entire area. Then, using a straight edge or derby, screed the stucco to a uniform depth of 3/8 of an inch thick. Once the stucco has become thumbprint hard, scratch horizontal grooves 1/8 of an inch deep into the base coat across the entire area with a raking tool. This is why this step is commonly referred to as the scratch coat. Allow the scratch coat to cure for 24 to 48 hours. Keep the surface of the stucco damp with a fine water mist. This step will help reduce shrinkage cracking, especially in hot, dry conditions. Now, mix and apply another 3/8 inch layer of base coat stucco directly to the scratch coat. This step is called the brown coat. Using a straight border derby, screed the brown coat surface to a true, even 3/8 inch thickness. Fill any surface voids with additional base coat. The total combined base coat depth should be 3/4 of an inch thick. As soon as the stucco has lost its sheen, float the surface uniformly. Then, cure the base coat with a fine water mist for 24 to 48 hours. For 2-coat applications over masonry block walls and poured concrete walls, the scratch coat step is eliminated from the process. Simply dampen the wall, apply the brown coat, then screed and float the surface to uniform 3/8 inch thickness. Now that the base coat is complete, Quikrete finish coat stucco can be used to provide numerous decorative color and texture options for your stucco wall. Finish coat stucco is available in both white and gray formulations and can be combined with more than 20 standard Quikrete stucco and mortar colors. Popular textures such as heavy lace, light lace, dash, sand float, and smooth finishes are easy to achieve with a little practice. Working from the bottom of the wall to the top, apply a consistent 1/8 inch thick coating of finish coat stucco. Then use a whisk brush to lightly dash finish coat stucco onto the wall. And then use a trowel to knock down and flatten the stucco. If you prefer a heavier texture, first spread the finish coat stucco in a thin application to achieve good color coverage, and then double back with a heavier, uneven application. Once the heavy coat begins to harden, knock the finish down with the trowel, creating a heavy lace finish. If a smooth finish is your preference, simply use a trowel or sponge float in a circular motion. It is important to complete the entire wall in one application. This will help limit any color inconsistencies from batch to batch. Then keep the surface damp for several days by applying a fine water mist.
All right. That wasn't bad, was it? Okay.
Ever applied stucco before?
Physically, no. Thank God. You?
No, just wondering.
All right. The good thing in our business is we criticize. We don't have to do any of the work. We criticize, give people a list of stuff that's wrong and leave. All right. Flashing. let's talk about flashing because that's a huge, that's a real critical thing. Diverting water away from off of the structure, not allowing it to get in. There are so many ways for water to get in, windows, doors, penetrations, all that kind of stuff. So everything has to be flashed properly. Without proper flashing, water gets in and bad things happen. You get the mold, the termites. Sometimes, if it's chronic and no one does anything about it, you start getting structural issues. So, some of the pieces that you commonly see in stucco cladding systems. One we touched on a little bit already is the weep screed. Weep screed. You'll hear inspectors call this out all the time. So what exactly is a weep screed? It's a little piece of flashing that runs along the bottom of the walls, helps hold the stucco up and in place, right? And then any incidental water that gets beyond the stucco is able to wick out the bottom of holes along that weave screed. So you'll see it. Obviously, that's going to have to be a little bit lower than the sill plate. The sill plate is that bottom plate of a wall, of a wood frame wall. It's got to be a little bit lower than that. It'll be about an inch or so lower. It's in a shingle fashion, in other words. So any incidental water gets out into it, it drips out below that. There's a joint there where that sill plate meets the concrete, right? Sorry. So I always like to mention during an inspection that uh, when water gets in, it follows all paths. Everybody's heard it. Water follows the path of least resistance. Well, that's not that it's untrue, but water will follow all paths, and gravity is pretty predictable, right? And maintenance free. So the majority of the water will flow down, and hence the weep screed down there will allow it to flow out. You'll see something like this on like brick or stone. You ever see those like on a brick wall? You ever see those little small holes drilled at the bottom? They're every few feet apart. It's the same thing. Incidental water that gets back there has a way to get out. Those are much more detailed pictures. So that weave screed is actually installed directly to the sheathing, and then you'll see either the felt paper or the synthetic water resistant barrier on top of that. So again, it's shingle fashion, right? The lath is then added, and then we can see our 3-coat system in this little graphic here. So as you can see, if water gets through, hits the moisture barrier, travels down the wall, exits through the holes. Pretty simple process. And it's actually also really important to note your clearances. Okay, clearances above grade, and whether that grade is hardscape or softscape. You don't ever want to see stucco terminating below ground. Okay, that is only going to encourage moisture, because the dirt, right, is always wet. So it will encourage water to wick up the stucco, but it also provides a hidden travel plane for termites. Okay, it's actually been in the Florida code since about 2001, and that's when we went to a total Florida code about then. So it's been in our code since about 2001, and I did a little research. It's been in the Texas code since about 2009. Okay, so in other words, it's been there for a very long time. You should not have that veneer going down below grade. It's subject to the moisture damage and the hidden travel plane. In other words, the termites live down there in the ground and they crawl up behind it and you can't see it. When you have that clearance and you see a little termite trail coming up, you call somebody, right? You go, hey, I've got, signs of termites, and somebody comes out and they can then deal with the termites through some kind of treatment. All right, kick out flashing. I'm sure everybody has heard about kick out flashing. This is very, very common. You could end up, this could be in a report in a couple different areas. Could be in the wall, whatever page that's on, exterior walls, or on the roof, or even both. Either way, you can see it's associated with the roof system and the wall system, so it's relevant to both. Either way, though. Some people call it a diverter, this little thing that kicks out. Put my laser back on here. This little part. So it's diverting water. Okay, diverter flashing or kick-out flashing as it's commonly called. So it diverts water away from the siding and into the gutter or just off the wall, period. When this is installed correctly, it's a very good protection against that water penetration into the whole wall, through the stucco into the wall assembly. Anytime you see an area where a roof line terminates directly on an exterior wall, that's where you'll have those kickouts. And let me say this, it has always been a requirement. In other words, it has never been code to funnel water into a wall assembly. Never. Unlike the whole stucco going down into grade, well, it was not in the code prior to, in your case, 2009. However, with flashings like this, it has never been allowed to funnel water into that wall assembly. There's always been required to have these areas flashed. They have just gotten better with the way it's worded in the code now than what it used to be. So picture on the left, really good job of showing you where it's needed. So whenever you have that roof terminating there, you should have that kick out. And if you ever see those, those dark stains streaming down the side of a wall close to a roof, that is a real good indication that you don't have proper flashing. And I have a good picture here. I took this. We weren't doing the inspection on this house. I was actually doing it on the house next door, but I saw this from the street, and this just really, it gives you that good visual. Where's the water stain? Right? You can see it coming down the wall. So they haven't they haven't even installed flashing here yet. And you see how that's even covered a little bit, but you see the path of the water. That is where the water is going. So you should always see that. Now I'm going to show you some images here of examples of damage that happen from not having the proper kickout. Look at this. Dang, it's kind of like those old EIFS pictures. When water is not being diverted, it can get into the wall and bad things happen. A lot of times you can't see this, so it goes on for a long time, and then you have significant damage, right? Because it's all concealed, out of sight, out of mind. Now, the cost to remedy this is a whole lot more expensive. And if you have structural damage, it's even worse. When you live in high wind areas like I do, engineering has changed big time. And you're talking massive straps and anchors and all this kind of stuff. So it can get expensive really, really fast. If you even suspect some further destructive investigations, highly recommended, especially, wood frame like this. So if that ever comes up in a report, yeah, you want to definitely get into that. Now, this is a real important part of flashings. It's the roof to sidewall flashing. Okay, the picture you're seeing here, it's a combination of step flashing, all these little pieces, as well as counter flashing here. Okay, that's again, it's in shingle fashion. So this part is over this part. So as water hits and runs down, it follows that path and it is diverted, goes down to the kickout, right? And is diverted off. Now all this stuff will be installed before the stucco goes on. So again, it's in shingle fashion. So stucco will be on top of all this stuff. This will typically be galvanized because it's going to get wet. Sometimes copper, right? If you're rich like Isaac here, he's got a really nice house. He's got copper flashings on his place. This is an example of flashing installed on the face of the exterior wall. Now, it can be before the stucco application or over the stucco on like an addition. Okay, that's a good indication there's an addition there. Sometimes it's face applied and then sealed, and then sometimes regleted. Regleted, you said, John? Yes. Alex, I will take what is regleted for 500. This is a reglet. Okay, you see how it's cut into the chimney right here? Well, that is that. So it gets cut in and then sealed. All right, so I'm sure everybody has heard about some of the negative reputations that stucco has. It has had over the decades, but we have to ask the question, is that reputation deserved? The simple answer is no, but obviously we have to dive a little deeper into this, right? So you'll see for yourself the positive and the negative that stucco has to offer. Dad jokes are flying here. Many people find themselves in this position where you got to have a lot of money, right, to remediate stucco homes that are done wrong. And what I'm talking about is when you tear all the stucco off. We have this townhouse complex that's just a few miles up the road here. And I've done probably 3 of them in there back when they were new. I have seen them remove the entire stucco off the whole building at least 2 times. Like they just can't get it right. So that starts to get expensive real fast. You do that and you start finding the rot, the damaged stuff, sometimes the damaged studs and those kind of things. And something like that can just be financially devastating to people. So that's why we're all here, is because we all advocate for inspections. So when your inspector's talking about cracks, remember all cracks leak and water gets in and bad things happen. The longer it has been getting in, and you may not know what that time frame is, the worse it gets. Rule number 1, the better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house is going to perform. And like I said, all cracks leak. And this is the story I wanted to tell you. UCF Constructability Lab, which is University of Central Florida, right after our '04 hurricanes, we had 3 of them hit in '04 back to back to back. And they did this study. And one of our friends from church was one of the PhD dudes that worked on this, is how I even found out about the whole thing. They tested houses as in all different phases of construction. So, and I'm talking ASTM spray rack standard done by engineers. Okay, so they did them on bare block walls. They did it with just the brown coat. They did it with the repeating these tests on the scratch coat, then on the final coat, then with paint. And what they determined, and this is not my opinion, these are the PhDs, that cracks as small as 1/64th of an inch allowed water penetration. 1/64th of an inch. You know how thick that is? It's 2 pieces of paper. That's it. And that can be exacerbated when something like the sun comes out, and then you have thermal drive that actually forces it, pushes it through those cracks. So that's why I say the better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house is going to perform in rain, and when you have winds and the sun comes out, all those kind of things. So what's the other problem? Could be poor construction, poor installation, right? That causes some of these issues. That's right. It's the studs. Any water that does migrate through the stucco could get through the house and damage the studs. So we have to manage the water. Okay. The water gets in and it can damage the studs. Okay, I'm laughing in my head if you guys aren't. So that would be tragic to damage the studs, right? So does that mean that we are doomed? No, of course not. Stucco is very versatile. It's a gorgeous product, in my opinion. It will provide you 50 plus years of protection if it's been applied right and it's been maintained. Okay. So if it's been applied right and maintained, it should work very well. I am really excited to hear your excitement. That's fantastic. But it's all about making sure it's installed and maintained properly. So here are a few of the common problems found in stucco uh, houses. Simply put, the reason stucco gets a bad rap is the poor installation and maintenance. Water gets in, bad things happen, right? You look at this picture, and actually, I realized that could be one of the houses I worked on as a kid. I got to tell you the story. I'll never forget this. One day, me and this guy Buddy were working on this house, and Buddy knocks over a bucket of wet stucco all over me. Right? It was a big deal. HR got involved, and they asked me what the heck happened. And of course, I had to tell them the truth. I was a kid. I was scared. I had to tell them the truth that Buddy kicked the bucket, and I got plastered. All right. On this house, the water has not been managed, right? It's gotten to the underlying wood structure, was not protected right. But I will tell you one thing, it's not like there's a perfect installation either, right? Most systems are not installed with the proper thicknesses. They just never are. They never have the cure time in between. Flashing details, if they're there, may not be right. Like you just saw those pictures, what it looks like when kickouts aren't proper. You see what kind of repercussions those have, the massive damages. So any breaches in the envelope are going to allow that water intrusion. And if you let it go and don't take care of it, you get structural damages. You get mold growth. We get damage to the studs, right, ladies? So every issue I just highlighted there, everything is related to the installation and the maintenance, not the product itself. I guess is my point. It's a better way to put it. The job is only as good as the stud applying it and the stud maintaining it, right? All right. Let's debunk some myths about stucco because there's a lot of myths out there. The first one is buying a home with stucco is just asking for trouble. I'd say the biggest difference between stucco that poses a hazard and stucco that adds value and aesthetics to the home is whether it was installed and maintained properly. That's my argument. I think just claiming that buying a stucco home is asking for trouble, I don't think is true. Myth number two, stucco is difficult to maintain. To answer this, I think we got to discuss proper maintenance. I keep beating this drum, right? You have to, as the homeowner, you have to regularly check for cracks, okay? And then you have to know the root cause of those cracks. Then you have to attend to these promptly. Okay. Once you figure out what the cause is, you've got to get on it right away because nothing gets better with time. Now, cracking could indicate a problem with the foundation, some settlement. It could be simply shrinkage. No, I don't have a funny slide or anything like that here, but I could. Homeowners sometimes attempt to fix their crack problems with an impermeable paint, and you'll see those commercials. What the problem with those is they can't breathe. Okay, it's important to keep in mind that stucco should always be painted with a permeable paint. Remember, you got to allow for vapor escape. You got to allow water to get out rather than trapping it inside like those old eaves systems. If you think about it for a second, if you put something impermeable on there, it's kind of like putting a plastic bag over the house, right? Water can't get in, but it can't get out either. Another part of maintenance is, well, it's the inspection, okay? This is going to give you an opportunity to spot things before they become worse or overwhelming, if you will, right? Professionals are going to know exactly what to look for when looking for defects and allowing you to zero in on problem areas and have them repaired proactively. So, like any system in a house, it's real beneficial to have a professional come out and do a pre-inspection rather than reacting to the problem. It's always less to fix it now than it will be tomorrow or next year. So small cracks are very, very common, right? It's when you get those cracks that are larger or they're out of plane or they're rotational. That's when it can be something more serious. You're talking foundational. So simply repairing a crack doesn't fix that kind of problem. It only kicks it down the road. So if you're having a problem with a foundation where it's getting excessive movement, it's most likely it's going to cause multiple effects. Okay, you shouldn't just see a few small stucco cracks and think you've got a foundation problem. And too many people do. Too many inspectors say that it's settlement cracks, and it's not settlement. It's most of the time it's shrinkage. When you have settlement, you will typically see some corroborating evidence. You'll see, foundation movement. You may see communication to the interior in the drywall transitions and stuff like that. You'll typically know, you'll know that it's a structural problem, but typically shrinkage. Another myth: stucco doesn't. It's not aesthetically pleasing. That doesn't even make sense. Maybe you have some patterns that have become obsolete, all right, but that's pretty subjective too. But the last one, all stucco homes pose the same problems. Since we've already talked about the professional installation is the key to a good stucco job. Let's ask, what's the difference between a professional installation and one that's not? What's the difference? I think it's pretty simple. The key is the labor that performs the work, right? Just like any other system in your home, finding a qualified person, somebody that's familiar with local codes, local weather, those all make a huge difference, right? So no matter what material you choose for your exterior veneer, all of it will have to be installed properly and maintained properly. It doesn't matter what it is. I think often the negative stigma associated with stucco was associated with those old eaves systems. But again, you don't see that all too often. But speaking of eaves, That has had that bad reputation because water would get in and it couldn't get out. It was like an igloo cooler. You know, I know we've touched on this. And there's another beautiful picture. So incorrectly installed eaves on wood. Well, you put wood, it could be some type of chipboard in there as well, some older installations. But you get water in, bad things happen. The termites, the wood rot, the structural issues, all those kind of things. So why does it have such a bad reputation? Because if it's not installed correctly and it's not maintained correctly, you can't expect it to perform correctly, right? Everything we've been talking about for the last hour and 45. All right, I need to speed up here a little bit. I didn't realize it's getting so late. So, how do you tell the difference if it's EIFS or hard coat? Well, the easiest thing is the touch test or the knock test. Okay, if you knock and it hurts, you know, it's like a solid boulder, that's probably hard coat. If you knock and it sounds, you'll number one, you'll hear it sound. It'll sound a little hollow. You could also give it a little, you know, a push, and it's not like it's going to crush and break or anything, but you can tell. You can really tell the difference. So touching it, knocking on it is the easiest way. If there's styrofoam under there, you'll know the difference. Okay, now for the stucco inspection process. First, we start with a visual. Okay, for context, see what's happening. Then trying to determine what kind of overall condition it's in, how well the installation looks, right? So an inspector first starts walking around the entire house, looking for signs of water intrusion, water damage. Sometimes that stains, sometimes you see efflorescence. Efflorescence is that white stuff, and that's basically the salts left behind. Okay, water's gotten in and it's evaporating, and that's the chemical process that's left behind. So when I see a fluorescence, I know there's a water issue there. Like, you know, we talked about flashing, looking at flashing details. Does the stucco extend down below grade? Remember, we should have those clearances. Next one's going to be a visual inspection of the interior, looking for that interior manifestation from an exterior source. Okay. Uh, so or I'm looking at the interior of the home and I'm seeing evidence of water penetration through that wall, that's going to be a big red flag, right? Especially if there's you have no plumbing in that wall, or there's no line set, the AC line set or something like that. It's just a regular wall. If it's around a window, well, I'm pretty sure I know where it's coming from, right? Something's not flashed properly, something's not installed properly. Um, the next step is using infrared. Infrared is amazing, awesome, and Isaac, you'll have to buy a camera eventually. Spend a lot of money. Don't buy cheap. All right. But with the infrared, you'll find things that your eyeballs cannot. All right. And that's why it is so valuable. Long before you ever see that manifestation, you can find the problems and address it. And it's always cheaper to find it up front. I got an image here. There we go. Okay. So you can see IR infrared, it basically sees temperature. Okay. Something that's wet is going to be a different color than the dry thing that it's next to. Make sense? So we can use our cameras to scan the whole house fairly quickly. You can go over the ceilings, the walls, and you're looking for any anomalies. And that's what you'll find when water penetrates, right? So here we can see it started up here running down the wall. When you look out the window, there's a chimney here and it didn't have proper kickout flashing. Another one is surface moisture testing, areas that are suspected to be have damage. Okay, Once we find the anomaly with the camera, we then prove moisture content. We can go over it with a pinless or a non-intrusive moisture meter. That's going to measure just below the surface, goes in just below a little bit, and into the material that it's on. And it's looking for those anomalies, the elevated readings compared to the dry thing near it. So that's going to help us identify areas of concern or areas that will need further destructive investigation. Invasive stucco inspections, here you should only get somebody that is really qualified, okay, that's been through specialized training, because it does involve some damage. You're going to drill some holes, and then it's going to help you basically peer into the interior, that wall cavity. The moisture meters they have these long probes that we stick in those drill holes, and so therefore they can go way deeper than just the pinless that I was just telling you about, right? The scanning ones. So that goes way into the inside. Again, I'd mentioned EDI, Exterior Design Institute. They've got a list of people that are qualified to do this. It would be some good additional training for you, Isaac, to look into that, but do that down the road. These kind of inspections are going to cost you more, okay, because it's more work. But sometimes those things have to be done. They're really not that bad, though. You think about drilling holes. Look at that. This is a good example, and you can see how large they are. They're not huge. Okay, they're not softball size. They're just drill bit size of a pencil. They're pretty small. You patch it properly, it almost looks like it never happened. So let's go over and discuss some of the red flags that come up during an inspection. There are a lot of visual indications when there's a potential problem. Okay, with the stucco, obviously we're talking. I'm going to look at a few of these visual aids, if you will, and I think that helps stick in here, right? That way, when you're with a client and they have some concerns, you can help them just like an inspector and identify some of those major issues and look like the rock star that you are. Now, we've discussed some of these visual evidences already, but there's a little bit more. And I keep showing women in Superman capes and stuff, and I know Isaac has got to be sitting there like, hey man, what am I? Meatloaf. So I got one for you, Isaac. There you go, brother. All right. The first symptom is cracks. All right. Cracks are extremely common. You are going to have cracks. When you might have a single little hairline crack, it may not be a bad sign, but numerous cracks could be an indication of something bigger. Okay. Not always, but could be. Most of the time, those really thin cracks are associated with shrinkage. Remember, though, when you have multiple cracks, okay, these represent movement regardless of the type of or the cause of that crack. So, in other words, you add up each crack in order to determine how much. So, as an example, very simple math, if you had 8 1/8 inch cracks, that would be the same as 1/1 inch crack. Make sense? You always add those up. That's the total movement or the total shrinkage. If you have big cracks, though, this could indicate structural problems. All right, that picture on the left side there, where we're seeing those really big cracks, looks like an earthquake hit that wall, right? That's an indication of a much bigger problem. That picture on the left, that looks like we have some foundation issues. The foundation that holds the wall up has moved down. See that? This would require further investigation. because we're all humans. Nobody can see what it looks like underneath, what's going on with the foundation. You're not going to discover you can't prove the cause during a home inspection on something like that. The crack on the right, well, that definitely looks like a water pathway. Look at the size of the hole right here. And where does the water go? Plus, that's not a proper window installation. And like water will get in. Okay, so I also don't know what it looks like inside. Are there concealed damages? I would expect, but I can't prove anything. I can tell you one thing, I will be focused on the interior on the other side of this, right? There are, one of my neighbors was a coatings expert with Sherwin-Williams for a couple of decades. And he told me about a product. I forgot what it's called, but I've used it on my house. As a consumer, you can go to the Sherwin-Williams store and buy this product to smear in cracks and stuff like that. And it's a real simple, like you apply it with your fingers because you don't want it to be, you don't want it to look like, you're not going to apply it evenly and smoothly. You want it to kind of blend in because you look at that stucco finish, it looks like it's all over the place, right? I would also think or say that when you have structural issues, that would be a real good time to have maybe somebody like a home inspector come do elevation measurements. If you had one when you moved in and now you have this, you'll be able to prove how much how much movement has taken place, right? Next, we have stains, right? Sometimes, yeah, it's not pretty, but you want to avoid the temptation just to simply paint over stuff. Okay. Paint is not going to stick to stuff like this fungus among us. Okay. All you're going to do is hide a condition. And if there is real issues inside, now all of a sudden it's starting to look like fraud. Okay. So you need to know what's going on before you start covering things up. You always want to address the underlying problem first before you paint over anything. Some stains are real obvious and require cleaning and painting, and it's real easy. Like you see this, you guys have seen that brownish looking arch when sprinklers are hitting the house. That's an easy one. Okay, no need to panic. We know exactly where it came from. If you're seeing fungal growth, that is telling you it's a chronic moisture condition, right? And maybe you have to you add gutters or change the grading, other diversion techniques, stuff like that. The other one thing I think is really important, talked about it earlier, making sure you have the right kind of paint, right? You do not want a full elastomeric. You have to have something that breathes. If the full elastomeric is like putting a garbage bag over it, okay, it cannot breathe. So water can't evaporate and dry out. Here we've got some stucco moss, and this is telling me this is a chronic problem. Okay, this particular one, we have negative grading, no gutters, and this house I did personally, and this growth I could see growing on the interior of the house. It's been going on for so long, it just kind of grew, it kept getting fed, right? All that water, and it grew up in behind the stucco. Crumbling stucco. This could be due to simple age, like our bodies, stuff happens. Could be settlement, could be termite damage, it could be a lot of things, impact damages, stuff like that. But here, maybe you go ahead and hire somebody like a professional home inspector that knows what they're doing and helps you interpret, because none of this stuff will get better. It can only get worse. And look at this. Like you see this is a huge problem. This is telling you there's significant and chronic water intrusion, and all that stucco on that building will have to be pulled off. You have no other choice. or you wait long enough and it'll come off all by itself. Let me tell you this one thing. Little cracks grow up to be big cracks, and big cracks grow up to be lawsuits. If you don't believe me, somebody moving into this house where the authority having jurisdiction has come by and said this is unsafe for human occupancy, they're mad and they're getting attorneys. You get water intrusion like this, and we're starting to see the fungus among us. What type is it? We don't know. What's the extent? How much is growing in concealed areas? You don't know. So this is going to prompt some destructive investigation, if you will. So I've said it 10 times already. The better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house performs. So I have a few maintenance tips for you. First one's going to be keeping everything clean. Don't let the moss and the mold and all that stuff grow up on it. Keep it clean. Keep it sealed. And when you find problems, take care of it right away. Okay? Waiting, it can only get worse. And that is it. And I have nailed it right at 5 o'clock. So if anybody wants to talk shop, I'm more than happy to sit and listen and attempt to answer questions. If not, again, in the chat, I have put some of those contacts. If you're looking for a home inspection company, you have questions, you want training for your team or your office, give us a holler. So if you want to hang out and ask some questions, I'm here. If not, everybody is free to go and you will get your CEs in a week or so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question, John.
Yes, ma'am.
Should buyers always get a stucco inspection even on the newer homes?
Yeah, well, if it's brand new, we haven't had the time for water to become a chronic problem. And I guarantee you're going to have cracks. All houses have cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So I would before I would panic, I would start with the simple home inspection and go from there. If something, issues come up, then certainly something more invasive or maybe somebody more, the next level inspection, right? But I always start with the cheap and see where you go. I would never discourage you from hiring somebody like somebody from EDI coming out on EIFs, like all day long, every time. I would never discourage you from having somebody that has more qualifications from coming out. But if you do that on every single inspection, it just starts getting expensive. So at a minimum, start with the home inspection. And again, you guys can look at cracks, and when you start seeing cracks that are rotational, okay, that's a big red flag. Anything that is out of plane, that's movement. Those are scary things. When it's the same, the crack is the same size at the top and the bottom, that's probably shrinkage. That's going to happen. It's not a scary thing, and it's very easily fixed. The better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house performs.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And if at all, if the a seller on a resale property, if they have either patched or covered it up, how would an inspector be able to get to know about it? Or
Yeah, that's tricky, right? Would definitely ask for some explanation. If I see a patch in a wall, I see sellers disclosure and obtain receipts. Okay.
Right.
If they, okay, I get it. There was damage and they fixed it, and they show you, my daughter ran into the wall with a car. Okay, I got it. I can live with that. I feel peace. If they tell you the toilet overflowed, we had some damage and we had to, we had to make other repair. I want to know the history.
Right.
So you got to take these on an case by case basis,
Correct. Yep.
right? Wood frame construction might be more of a concern than masonry construction, because the block can get wet. That's not a problem. But when wood and stuff like that gets wet, it's a bigger problem. So everything's going to be a case by case.
Right. Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying, John.
Yes, ma'am. Anytime. We appreciate you guys. Thank you very, very much for coming, and check us out again in the future.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It was insightful. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care.